She slumps on the floor, huffing heavily, groaning in anguish, weeping with her face dotted with welts, when Bill saunters in, ribbing her with a smirk and swabbing her cheek with a cloth stitched with his name. He wants to prove he's not a vile creep and urges her to toss any such notion. He admits he's a thrill hound but swears to handle her gently, calling her kiddo while she dubs herself his baby, before a loud crash jolts the room and darkness sweeps in. The bride appears at Vernita's door uninvited, and when their peepers lock, memories of past scuffles flood their heads, and in that instant, she whacks the home dweller on the jaw, igniting a wild brawl. No chatter needed. Vernita hurls her into a glass pane, smashing it to bits, and tries to squash her, but gets thwarted. The attacker boots her in the gut, sending her tumbling onto a table. A stick nearby becomes Vernita's tool, swung to dish out hurt, but the bride ducks, grabs her from behind, and clamps her throat until she nearly conks out. The home dweller retaliates with a stray gadget, drops a shelf on her, then darts away. The dame pursues her to the slacks, wielding a panty in a zany tussle, while Vernita snags a blade. They flaunt their knack with these odd implements, but the attacker drops her panty, nabbing a blade that nearly jabs her foe. Now wary of each other, neither showing a hint of wimpiness, the school bus rolls up, and their expressions suggest they'd rather clash another day to keep the young one out of it. They stash their weapons the moment the kid enters, but the trashed room shouts chaos. The kid asks what happened, and her mom pins it on the goopy mutt. She presents the intruder as a chum to her daughter, who squints at her like a nosy snoop, but her mom directs her to scamper inside while they wrap up their grown-up gab.
Me and Mommy's friend got some grown-up talk to talk about. Nakia, in your room.
The child obeys, and the spark to tussle fades, with Vernita offering the attacker a mug of joe, and she agrees. The two were in a squad together where the attacker was codenamed Black Mamba. Vernita frets about her kid getting tangled in some gnarly trouble at her tender age, but Black Mamba assures her, saying she's decent enough not to zap her in front of the little girl, vowing to wait for a better moment before unleashing her rotten quirks. The home dweller grovels for botching her life way back, vowing that if she could spin time's dial, she'd erase her blunders, but notes the attacker still hungers for get back. The dame confesses she's there for something tamer than get back, as true vengeance would be scrubbing her clean off the globe. Vernita begs for clemency for her sprout's sake, waving a mother-daughter portrait, but the scorned woman halts her, refusing to be lured by a sappy trick and let her crusade skid off course. They settle to clash at dawn's crack, but first, Black Mamba recalls Bill's spiel that her rival was nifty with a sharp cutter. The home dweller just grins and starts rustling up grub for her sprout, but it's a ploy to nab the edge. She gripes that she should have been dubbed Black Mamba, then dives for a cereal carton hiding a shooter and blasts at the intruder, but floods, spurring the attacker to chuck the mug of joe her way and sling a cutter that zips straight between her bust. She flops to the floor, gone in a snap. As the slayer retrieves her cutter, the little lass stumbles in, numb, gawking blankly. The dame apologizes to her for the ghastly scene she's glimpsed and says she'll linger if the sprout picks a grudge when she's grown. She hops into her ride, but before zipping off, she slashes her latest quarry's name from her red roster, leaving 3 more to wrangle. 54 months ago, in the city of El Paso, Texas, cops snoop around a crime scene while a corpse with a bloodied noggin lies kaput on the floor. The police honcho rolls in, and he's handed a rundown. It's a wedding shindig that ended miserably with 9 corpses, including the couple, the preacher, and his missus, found croaked, clearly bumped off. A wild hunch pegs it as a Mexican mafia hit crew's work. He stoops to eyeball the gal closer, wondering why anyone would ice a pregnant chick. The officer spills the gal's name but figures it's bogus, and just then, the gal, thought to be a goner, sparks to life, hacking up a mix of blood and spit that splatters the honcho. Elle, the one-eyed patch girl from the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad, swaggers into the hospital, decked in white with a splash of red. She slips into a nurse getup and hums along as she preps a syringe, then struts to the bride's ward, where the gal's just patching up. She checks her breathing, then murmurs to the zonked-out chick, confessing how she loathes her, but gives her props. She reckons her errand there's a favor, since in their line of work, folks rarely get zapped to the great beyond while snoozing. As she jabs the needle into the intravenous tube, her phone buzzes, and it's Bill, prompting her to halt and yap with the guy. The guy gets the scoop on the gal's condition, and when he's told she's zonked out, he orders the assassin to ditch the gig. He says they've clobbered her plenty, yet somehow she's still kicking, but he'd never sink to skulking like a weasel and robbing her of a fair scrap, as that'd tank his rep and all he stands for. For him, if she snaps awake, he'd go full tilt at her again. The scrub the mission call riles L, who's loud about just zapping her, but Bill sways her with solid reasons, making her cave. She tosses a warning to the battered gal to join her forebears instead of bouncing back to consciousness and facing her fury. 4 years after the grisly fiasco, Black Mamba bolts awake from her deep snooze, with jarring flashes from her ordeal swarming her noggin and whipping her into a tizzy. Realizing she's lost her baby sends her into heavy sobs as she wails and rubs her belly. She pulls herself together, still frazzled, and flops back, faking a snooze when a staffer and a creep stroll in. The staffer spells out the rules for snagging the zonked-out gal after pocketing his cash, then bails, leaving the creep to have his jollies.
Oh, shit. If she dries, just lube up with this and you'll be good to go. Bon appetit, good buddy.
The creep grabs a can of goo, shucks his jacket, and climbs atop the gale, primed to dive into the deed. As he tries for a sloppy smooch, his shrieks echo through the room from the scorned gal chomping his tongue. It's a wild chomp, and she releases the creep from her teeth's grip only after he croaks, crashing to the floor like a lumpy sack. With her mug and duds splattered with blood, she tries to bolt, but her limbs, wobbly and glitchy, give out. Spotting her pickle, she swiftly digs into the dead creep's pocket and snags a blade to fend off trouble if someone pops up. Just then, the nutty staffer swings by with a time's up holler for his client, but he finds the guy kaput, sparking panic, and his fear spikes when the gal's nowhere in sight. The gal, still wobbly and unable to stand, pops up behind the creep and snips his Achilles tendon open, making the fella flop and freeze in place. She hauls him to the door and starts bashing the door against his noggin, demanding he spill Bill's whereabouts. The creep, helpless and unable to fight back, just hollers that he's clueless about the name she keeps yapping about. She suddenly recalls the times the creep would sneak in during her zonked-out snooze and have Nookie with her. This sparks a heap of fury, pushing her to muster every ounce of grit she's got and, for one final whack, slam the door against his noggin, slowly draining the life out of him. She snatches his car keys, throws on his duds, and rolls out in a wheelchair. At the garage, she finds the creep's ride, her lower half still numb, and fumbles to scoot into the back seat. As she tinkers with tricks to get her limbs ticking again, flashes of her attacker swarm her brain, and right there, she picks her first mark. O-Ren. At age 9, O-Ren already faced life's rough side when her folks got zapped by a Yakuza honcho. Both parents viciously skewered with a blade while she cowers under the bed, swallowing her grief and staying mum to dodge the same fate as her folks. 3 years later, the kid turns the honcho's creepiness against him, striking him the same way he zapped her parents, and ensures she's the last mug he sees before kicking the bucket. When 2 security goons barge in, she ducks under the bed like old times, then takes them out, blasting and nicking their legs before popping a bullet into their skulls, splattering their smarts all over. The toughened gal, now age 20, has carved a name for herself, locking in her rep as a world-famous hit lady. Now 25, she joined in zapping the wedding party, guests, and the preacher in a sacred spot. The woman in the ride finally twitches her tootsie, a hint that her limb numbness will soon fizzle. She literally finds her groove again and peels out, Soon after, she hops on a plane to Okinawa, Japan. She strolls into a local Japanese diner and sparks a cheery chinwag with the owner, who's tickled by her zippy knack for the local lingo. He hollers to his crew, but they snub him flat out, leaving him to tend to the guests. The owner puts her through her paces, tweaking her slip-ups, until his buddy rolls in, and a snappy spat over who's the hotshot at their shared gig kicks off between them. They even lock into a fist clench that the gal has to duck to avoid getting bonked, after which one chucks a blade at the other. She pipes up that she came to meet a fella, Hattori, she's never crossed paths with. The name sends a chill down the owner's spine, making him freeze and puzzle over why she's hunting for that guy. She needs Japanese steel, and he still gawks at why someone would trek all the way for such a tool. So she quips she's got some weasels to clear out. The craftsman leads her to the armory and flaunts the different specs of cutters, and in a jiffy, one catches her fancy, but the fella nudges her toward another. Turns out it's the snazzier pick. The cutter's perfection, the glint of her mug on the steel, sparks a grin. The craftsman, testing her grit and knack, lobs a baseball her way, and without batting an eye, she snips it into 2 chunks. It's Hattori himself tending to her, and the fella spills the truth about his code, having ditched the biz of crafting cutters that zap folks, now opting to whip up and stash them for kicks, and gawking. Black Mamba begs for a cutter despite knowing the fella's hung up his forge, insisting he's got to help her crusade since the person she's itching to get revenge on trained under him. He already clocks who she's after, so he scrawls the name that pops into his noggin on a glass pane, Bill. He'll pitch in, and as he steps out, he offers her a spot to crash and says he'll need a month to hammer out a cutter fit for the gig. 1 month zips by, and the sword's ready. Hattori's broken his vow to keep his sword crafting mojo under wraps, but the gal's plea was too big to shrug off. He poured his all into the piece, boasting it's his slickest cutter yet, one that could slice through a cosmic critter. He hands the cutter to the gal and tosses in his blessings. O-Ren has now been tapped as the new Yakuza honcho after the last one kicked the bucket. Her best pal and lawyer, Sophie, one of Bill's star pupils, just as lethal as her, plops beside her, all grins after the big news. Gogo, O-Ren's 18-year-old personal watchdog, is also on the scene. The young lass can be a terror, shrugging off her age and diving into grown-up antics like guzzling booze and such. She's so fierce that the fella at the bar she's yakking with catches her wild side when she whacks him with a cutter, taunting him to come get a piece of her if he dares. She's got another sharp-looking but ferocious dude in her crew, Johnny, always masked and poised to pounce the second she gives the nod. It's a time for whooping it up for the bigwigs, but as everyone chuckles and cheers, Tanaka, one of the head honchos, slams the table with his fist in a huff. He reminds the crew how their dads kicked off the outfit, but now their heirs have pulled something downright blasphemous, and he's dead certain the departed old-timers are spinning in their graves over their boneheaded move. Nobody wants to hear him finish his rant, hollering for him to cough up an apology pronto, even snapping at him. The outfit's new head honcho lets Tanaka yap his piece, and he quickly spouts how outrageous it is for a half-Japanese chick to snag leadership of the bigwigs, while also slinging the word bitch her way. The no-nonsense honcho hops onto the table, charges at him, and with one cutter whack, chops off his noggin. The lopped-off head tumbles across the table like a ping-pong ball, freaking out the crew but sparking a gleeful smirk from the honcho's right-hand lass at the sight of blood. O-Ren, still perched on the table, coolly lays out her expectations for the crew. She tells them to come at her with respect when they think something needs tweaking, but to stay ready to flip their opinions. In fact, they'd better be set to rethink their stance after such powwows, and one thing she'll never stomach is anyone griping about her heritage. She vows to part their noggins from their torsos as quick as a hiccup. Black Mamba touches down in Tokyo and tails Sophie, but after a quick rethink, zooms off on her bike, leaving the lass to bask in her happy moment while chattering on the phone. The honcho and her posse swing by the local tavern where they're greeted like big shots, with the tavern owners bowing low and ushering them in, clearing the path while they saunter along. The scorned chick lurks in a corner until she pinpoints the crew's hangout spot, where they're whooping it up, and sneaks a listen. But O-Ren's got razor-sharp instincts and a keen sense of her surroundings. She slyly spots a potential snoop and flings a dart toward the intruder, just missing and smacking a wall instead. On O-Ren's nod, Gogo steps out to scope the threat, but the chick dangles from the roof as the young hotshot scans around and finds zilch. The dangling lass nearly slips, almost blowing her cover, but the warrior lass misses it, strolling back to the room with Nada to report. The scorned chick shadows Sophie, who slips into a private nook to make a call, eyeballing her with a wicked glint, itching to pull off something super duper nasty. As the crew whoops it up, a voice hollers from outside the room, and when O-Ren struts out with her goons, she spots her best pal Sophie gushing blood after a backstab. The attacker unmasked herself by ripping off Sophie's left arm, sending agony to her core and yanking screams from her. After the guests and the tavern owner hightail it, the first goon lunges at Black Mamba, but she whacks twice, first snapping his cutter in half, then plunging the second blow straight into the goon's gut. She hoists him with the blade and chucks him into the nearby pool. The next batch of goons charging her way gets zapped to the great beyond in a hot second without her breaking a sweat. The following pack doesn't even clock what hits them as she wipes them out in a jiffy. O-Ren stands watching as the chick on a crusade demands more pawns in the showdown, and while it looks like it's down to just them, the young hotshot Gogo pops up with a whippy chain tipped with a spiky metal ball, tossing a cheeky high at their attacker. Black Mamba pleads with the little lass to butt out and steer clear of her honcho's personal scraps, but Gogo's brimming with swagger, chuckling off the plea and squaring up for the ruckus ahead. She swings her gizmo, launching it at her foe, who ducks it but can't keep up with the next flurry of swings, getting clobbered by the spiky ball. She parries the gizmo with her cutter, but Gogo snatches it from her and flings it aside, leaving Black Mamba wide open for the hit that smacks her and sends her crashing to the floor. She shields herself with a table, but the lass's contraption smashes through, nearly bonking the attacker, who's getting steamed by the young hotshot's skills. Gogo unleashes a barrage of whacks on the chick, but she keeps hopping from table to table to dodge the blows, with the wild gizmo zipping up and down the room. The lady keeps crunching numbers on the kind of moves her opponent throws out, and the next time she swings the weapon, Black Mamba blocks it clean and sends it right back, smacking the wall before bouncing into Gogo's noggin. She climbs on top, but the youngster flings her off, then whips out the sneaky blades hiding in that spiked ball. She hurls it forward, slicing into a shoulder, then reels it back again and hooks it into a wall behind her, choking her neck with the chain. The fighter drops her to her knees, eyes glowing hot red as the air drains out, but she spots a lifeline, a busted plank with nails sticking out, and jabs it into the toes before cracking her skull with it, knocking the young warrior out of life instantly. The boss still has a little trick tucked in her sleeve, and suddenly Johnny storms in with his masked goons pouring from every corner, charging headfirst at the attacker. They ring her up with swords and all kinds of metal, while she clutches her prize blade tight. The first bold dummy to lunge ends up in pieces, and the rest rush one by one, only to get their throats and chests carved open in single swings. Black Mamba doesn't care about the mob, even plucking out an eyeball and leaving a guard rolling in pure agony. Johnny finally steps in full of fury, slashing her gut and booting her back so she crashes down. The first clean strike since his crew started piling in. She fights them off from the floor with her sword, but one overeager clown leans too close and loses his whole arm. She gets back on her feet after a kill, and when a guard flings a battle axe at her, she snatches it midair, dodges damage, and lets another axe pass through until it buries itself into one of the masked fools. She then chucks the weapon in her grip at a guard, and it buries straight into his forehead, sending him crashing headfirst into the wall. She goes after the other enemies, clipping each one with a strike as she glides through, even lopping off one poor dude's noggin when he freezes in fear, and she cleaves another clean in two halves while the rest start moving like they suddenly grew some common sense. Johnny barges back in with his fury, and after a few clangs of shiny metal, he boots her in the belly again, shoving her backwards. The pressure is piling up heavy, so for a breather, she springs onto the upper part of the shack to dodge the mob rush, but they swarm her in a blink and keep the scrap going. This time, they charge at her one by one, basically lining up to get packed, so she slices through them like it's nothing. Johnny takes center stage again, throwing hands with his blade, but she blocks every swing and drops back to the floor, chopping down a masked grunt on landing, then yanks onto the bendy wood for a safe touchdown and lets it fly, cracking the mob boss right on his dome. She spots her real target slipping into the chambers, and that makes her turn up the tempo with the goons, but Johnny's right back in her face. She finally buries her sword in the man's gut and drags his whole meat suit as a shield to stall the rest circling around her. She crashes to the ground and starts carving at their legs, and when they drop like toppled sticks, she makes sure to ruin spots nobody crawls back from. She bolts upstairs, not out of fear this time, but as a play, hacking a few more along the steps. Caution fills the room till the lights snap out, and they're fighting half blind. But she's still carving them down one by one. When the glow flicks back, she finds the very last straggler is just a kid. So she smacks him on the wrist and sends him packing.
Go home to your mother!
Johnny comes back swinging way harder this time, boots her straight into the staircase rail, and she's literally hanging on for dear life before she scrambles back up and squares off with him. They scrap right there on the edge, but Black Mamba just slices his legs clean, and he goes flopping down into the tiny indoor pool like a rag doll. She tells the survivors to pack it up and bounce.
Except you, Sophie. You stay right where you are.
Except Sophie, who she singles out, and she lets the room know that every limb lying around is officially hers, like party favors. Then she strolls into the snowy yard after the Yakuza boss, and the boss is already grilling her about where she scored such a crazy sword. She drops Hattori's name, which blows the boss's mind, though she swears there's no way this lady's got enough juice left to finish the job. Black Mamba slips off her shoes, they both throw some little warm-up motions with their blades, and the duel kicks off. The boss lands first blood, carving a brutal cut across her back that drops her to the floor, and she's clowning her too, calling her a clueless girl just plain samurai. The boss promises her a fancy samurai-style death, but Black Mamba pops back up grinning for round 2 and actually cuts her. At first, the boss plays it cool, like nothing even happened, until the blood trickles down to her feet and she suddenly changes her tune. She even apologizes for running her mouth earlier, then tries one last swing. But a second later, the top of her head's gone, and she's left frozen, stunned, before collapsing. Now it's obvious that the sword really is Hattori's, and Black Mamba soaks up the win while the boss hits the ground for good. She nabs Sophie, drags her along, and before dumping her at the hospital front, she puts her through a little test run. The warning's clear. Spill about the Deadly Viper Squad or lose pieces of yourself. Sophie cracks just what Black Mamba wanted because she's both a message and a witness. But while the game moves on for both sides, there's one card nobody's telling Black Mamba yet, is that her daughter's still alive.